Señor Presidente
Mr. President
de los Estados Unidos de América,
of the
George
United States of
W.
America,
Bush,
George W. Bush,
muy distinguidos integrantes de su delegación,
distinguished members of the
mis
delegation,
compañeros de gobierno,
friends from the government,
muy distinguidos periodistas
distinguished journalists
internacionales y de
who
Colombia.
have come from other countries and from Colombia.
Quiero dar de nuevo la más
I
cálida
would like
bienvenida
to welcome
al presidente
again
Bush,
in the warmest fashion
su
possible.
delegación.
I would like to welcome his
En el
delegation as
almuerzo de
well.
trabajo que acaba de
During
concluir,
the working lunch we
al
have
final,
just had, at the end,
pudimos leer unos bellos
I
párrafos
was able to read
del
some
Libertador
beautiful
Bolívar.
paragraphs from
Uno
Bolivar, the liberator.
en la Carta de Angostura,
One in the Charter of
en el cual
Angostura,
destacaba
where he
la formación de la nación
actually
de los Estados
was
Unidos
talking about the creation of the American
alrededor
nation
de la libertad,
around or on the basis
alrededor de la
of
tolerancia
freedom,
y
tolerance,
alrededor de hacer de la ley general
and of having
una
a
respuesta al
general
interés colectivo
law
a través de
that
la
would
voluntad
respond to
individual.
common interest through individual wills.
Otra bellísima mención del Libertador
The Liberator
en el Congreso
also
Constituyente de
mentioned
Bolivia
a very nice
sobre el legado
paragraph
del
during
presidente George
the
Washington.
Constituent Assembly in Bolivia on the legacy
Expresaba
of
yo
President George
que
Washington.
las relaciones entre
I was saying
el
that
pueblo
the
colombiano y el
relations
pueblo
between
de
the
los Estados
Colombian
Unidos
people and the American people
son unas relaciones sólidas,
are sound.
de gran entendimiento alrededor de
We
los valores
have mutual
democráticos
understanding
desde el
on
nacimiento
democratic values
de nuestras
since
dos
the
organizaciones
birth
estatales.
of our two states.
Esta visita
This
nos
visit
enaltece,
is a reason
nos
for being
aumenta
proud.
la confianza en nuestras
We
relaciones,
will trust
en el
even
proceso
more
colombiano.
on our relations
Le
and
agradecemos
the Colombian
inmensamente, señor
process, and we
presidente
would like to thank you very warmly,
Llega
President
usted a
Bush.
Colombia
You have come to Colombia
en un momento de agitación por el
at a
proceso de
time
paz,
of unrest because of the peace process
en un momento
that is taking place.
de
You have come
revelaciones
at a time of revelations
que agitan muchísimo
that
el debate público,
really have motivated a
pero que se
public
están dando
debate.
por una razón,
But they are taking place
Porque
because of
nuestra
one
política de
reason,
seguridad
and that
democrática
reason is that
se ha
our
propuesto
policy
derrotar el
on
terrorismo
democratic
en
security
todas
has
sus expresiones,
tried to defeat
en la expresión
terrorism
guerrillera, en la
in the
expresión
guerrillas,
paramilitar,
in the paramilitaries,
porque nuestra política de seguridad
because our
democrática se ha
democratic
propuesto
security policy
restablecer la plena
wants
vigencia
to
de las instituciones
reestablish
democráticas en toda Colombia.
democratic institutions fully in
Estas
Colombia.
revelaciones se dan
And these revelations are
porque
taking
nuestra ley
place
de justicia y
because
paz
our law on justice and
exige
peace
la verdad.
requires and
Se
demands
exige la verdad para
truth,
que el país conozca la
truth, so
dimensión
that
de
the
la tragedia
country
sufrida.
will know the
Exige la
dimension of the
verdad
tragedy we
para
have gone
preparar un
through,
futuro
truth
libre de
to prepare
paramilitares,
us
libre
for
de
a
guerrilla,
future free
libre de
of the
narcotráfico.
guerrillas, the paramilitaries, and the drug
La ley de
traffickers.
justicia y paz que
The
hoy se
law
aplica
on justice and peace that is being
discutida
enforced has
en
been
el proceso
discussed
de aprobación en el Congreso.
in Congress throughout
Discutida en su
its
aplicación,
approval process, and it
tiene
has been
tres
discussed
elementos que la
during its
distinguen
implementation
de
and has
anteriores
three
leyes
elements that
de
makes
paz
it
en
different
Colombia
from
y en el
former
mundo.
legislation
Esta ley exige
in
la
Colombia
justicia.
and in the world. Number one,
No puede haber
justice.
amnistía ni
There
indulto
will be no
para
amnesty
delitos atroces.
for crimes against
Esta ley
humanity.
exige la reparación.
This law requires
No hay
reparations
otro país
to
en el
take
mundo
place,
diferente
and there
de
is no
Colombia
other single country
que
in the
pueda decir
world other than Colombia that might
que
say
para conceder unos
that
beneficios de
in
sentencias
order to
reducidas
have shorter
en
sentences
una ley de paz
within a law
exige
of
a los
peace,
victimarios
the
la entrega de sus
perpetrators
bienes
are
para reparar a las
required to
víctimas.
hand in their
Eso no
assets
se ha dado
so
en
as to
ninguna
repair
parte
the
del mundo.
victims, and that has never happened
Dos países de
anywhere
América
else
Latina
in the world. There are two countries
trataron
in
de
Latin
compensar
America that
víctimas
tried
de
to
gobiernos
compensate for the problems of the victims
sumas
under
modestas del
dictatorships,
presupuesto.
but with
Aquí se exige
money
compensar las
coming from the
víctimas
budget.
con todo
Here
el patrimonio,
we
con todo
will
el dinero
strive
de
to
los
give them
victimarios.
all the assets that the perpetrators have. It is truth, justice, and reparations, and these are the three key elements of our legislation. This country has an independent justice system, Mr. President, which makes our democracy different. The decision of my administration in this process of institutional recovery is total support for justice, so that Colombia may finally overcome the time of terrorism. I would like to go back in history. For 30 years, the Marxist guerrillas actually hit Colombia, and they proposed a social revolution, and they produced even more poverty. They proposed more democracy, and they were assassinating and murdering the mayors and the council members, and they were actually killing democracy. These guerrillas ended up being financed by drug traffickers, and there are many people in many regions of Colombia that were not protected by the state, and now they feel protected thanks to our security policy. The growth of the guerrillas and the lack of state protection for our citizens resulted in these guerrillas producing the paramilitarism, and these paramilitary phenomenon started committing the same crimes, atrocious crimes, as the guerrillas. The Marxist guerrillas brought to Colombia the validity of combining all sorts of struggle. They infiltrated universities, the labor movement, and the peasant movement. They infiltrated very important sectors of intellectual movements and journalists, and they infiltrated politics. The same guerrillas planted a hatred amongst the classes. They wanted to eliminate the foundation of solidarity on which this nation was built. The guerrillas taught the paramilitaries to combine all sorts of struggle. And what happened then? Some of these guerrillas actually signed an amnesty, but they were not required to tell the truth, which is something we are requiring now. So they didn't say which were the sectors of the civil society that had been infiltrated. These guerrillas were not demanded to give reparations to the victims, as we are asking for now. And these guerrillas were able, in spite of having committed so many atrocious crimes, to get an amnesty for atrocious crimes, amnesty that is not given out today for these crimes against humanity. The peace process that we are undertaking with the characteristics of truth, justice, and reparations actually set the limits for peace processes in the future. We have been very rigorous in this process. It has been a very serious process, and the world and Colombia will know that the processes in Colombia in the future with the guerrillas such as the ELN and FARC should require, as we are requiring today, truth, justice, and reparations. I would like you to know, Mr. President, that our commitment is the full defeat of terrorism and the total recovery of justice and of democratic institutions. We are working with a model of state. We are not dismantling the state, as has been done in many Latin American countries throughout the 90s, nor are we proposing a state-dominated government. We do not accept the dismantling of the state or state monopolies. What we are building is trust for private investment in Colombia, and at the same time, we are demanding social responsibilities. We see in trust a way of investing in our country. In investment, we see a development tool, and in growth, we see a possibility of overcoming poverty and building equity.
Llega usted a Colombia,
you have come to Colombia, Mr.
agitando para
President,
el continente una tesis
with
necesaria,
a thesis which is necessary for
diversificación
our
de la canasta
continent,
energética.
and that is the diversification of
Después de
the
Brasil,
energy basket. After
Colombia es el
Brazil,
segundo país del
Colombia
continente
is the second country
producción
in the
de
continent
biocombustibles.
in the production of
Creamos
biofuels.
los incentivos
We have
tributarios.
created the tax
Aprobamos la
incentives.
reglamentación
We
de
have
acuerdo
approved the
con las normas de la
regulations in
Organización
agreement with
Internacional de
the
Comercio.
standards of the
Ya hay
World Trade
proyectos produciendo más de
Organization.
1 millón de
There are
litros de etanol en
projects that
Colombia
are
al día.
producing more than 1,000 liters of
hay muchos
ethanol
que se
in
están
Colombia,
instalando.
and there are many more that are being installed.
Tenemos 6 millones de
We have
hectáreas
6
en la
million
Orinoco
hectares in
en
the
sabanas
Orinoco department, and these are
que
savannas
podemos
in
conquistar
general
para
that we
biocombustibles
can use for
sin
biofuel
destruir
production
un
without
solo árbol de
destroying
nuestra
a
selva.
single tree in our jungle.
Hemos agradecido al
We
presidente
have
de los
thanked
Estados
the
Unidos y a su
President of the
delegación
United States of America and his
el apoyo a
delegation
Colombia en
for
el
the
Plan
support
Colombia.
given to Colombia through the
La
Plan
lucha contra la
Colombia.
droga tiene apoyo.
The fight against the drug
Apoyos de
trafficking
discurso
received
y apoyos
support, practical support,
El apoyo de
and
su país.
your support,
De su antecesor, el
the
presidente
support
Clinton.
of President
Congreso.
Clinton, the support of
Su
your
apoyo
Congress,
entusiasta,
your
Con
enthusiastic
ejemplar
support,
determinación, presidente Bush,
Mr. President,
sido
have
apoyos
been
prácticos
very
a la valerosa
practical
lucha del pueblo
and have
colombiano
helped the struggle
contra las
of the
drogas.
Colombian people against
Tuvimos la
drug trafficking.
oportunidad de hablar de
We
temas
have
muy
the opportunity of discussing very important issues
como
as well,
nuestra agenda contra la
such
pobreza,
as the agenda against
nuestros
poverty,
objetivos sociales,
our social goals,
nuestro programa de familias
our
guardabosques único en el
program of
mundo,
forest rangers families,
paga
which
hoy a
is unique in the
50,000
world, that is
campesinas
paying
para que
50,000
mantengan
peasant
áreas
families
de-
so that
de
they
selva
can
libres de
protect
bosque,
the jungle
libres de droga,
free of
y
drugs,
cuiden la recuperación del
and
bosque
so that they
allí
can
donde fue
recover the
destruido.
jungle where it has been
Hablamos
destroyed.
nuevamente de nuestro acuerdo de
We have
comercio,
discussed our trade agreement
una
again,
posibilidad política de integración,
and political
ajeno a
possibility of
sectarismos
integration,
ideológicos,
and far away from
que busca
ideological
oportunidades
sectarisms,
para la
that is
inversión,
trying to look for
para el empleo
opportunities
digno,
of investment
con afiliación
and
a la
employment
seguridad
and
social.
with dignity and
Muchas
social
gracias por su
security
visita,
programs.
señor
Thank you
presidente.
very much, Mr. President,
Me
for
sentí muy
coming to
orgulloso de mis
Colombia. I am very
compatriotas
proud of my
cuando
fellow
usted
countrymen
tranquilamente,
when you could
después de aterrizar en el aeropuerto El Dorado,
come here after
alrededor de
landing
esos
at
paisajes
the
tan
airport,
bellos,
going
hizo el
through this
recorrido hasta la
beautiful
Plaza de
landscape,
Bolívar
and
y
was
hasta
able
esta
to
Casa
go
de
to
Nariño.
Plaza de Bolívar and to this
Me
palace.
siento muy
I am
orgulloso
very proud, Mr. President,
mundo
that the world
pueda constatar
may see
cómo este pueblo
how
colombiano
the Colombian
hoy está
people
superando
is
las
overcoming
grandes
nowadays the
dificultades
great
que lo han
difficulties
atribulado.
that we have suffered
nuevo, muchas
in
gracias
the
por
last
su
years.
visita.
And again, thank you so much for your visit, sir.
Well, Mr. President, thank you very much for your kind words and for your invitation. Laura and I are thrilled to be back in your country again. I've been really looking forward to coming to this beautiful capital city, and I thank the people of Colombia for such a generous welcome. We did have an extensive conversation, but that's what you'd expect when friends sit down at a table together. I bring the greetings of the United States. The people of this country, my country, care deeply about the human condition. We believe strongly in human rights and human values, just like you believe in them. We're two strong democracies, and we've got a lot in common and a lot of values that we share. So this visit advances those values. I listened very carefully to the President when he expressed concern about the immigration laws of the United States. He was most eloquent in his concern about Colombians who live in the United States, and I assured him that a top priority of my administration is the passage of comprehensive immigration reform. I will work with both Republicans and Democrats to get a comprehensive bill to my desk as quickly as possible, Mr. President. We talked about the benefits of expanding trade so that people in both our countries can benefit. The United States is Colombia's largest trading partner. Colombia is the second largest market in Latin America for U.S. farmers. Trade is beneficial to both countries, and it can grow even more with the free trade agreement that we signed in November. I told the President that I will work hard for the passage of that important piece of legislation. I believe that a trade package with Colombia is in the interest of both our nations, Mr. President. I'm looking forward to visiting with some Afro-Colombians today to talk about social justice programs. The reason I do is because it's very important for the people of South America and Central America to know that the United States cares deeply about the human condition, and that much of our aid is aimed at helping people realize their God-given potential. And so we'll talk about programs all aimed at giving people a chance to realize their dreams, Mr. President. And you described many of those programs at lunch, or your cabinet described many of those programs at lunch, and I was most impressed by the strategy of your administration and the vigor and the energy of your cabinet. I'm looking forward very much to talking up and continuing to work with you to defeat the drug lords and narco-traffickers, narco-terrorists. You recognize, like I recognize, that the most important function of state is to provide security for its people. You cannot tolerate in a society the ability of people to take innocent life to achieve political objectives. And so I appreciate your steadfast strength, and so do the people of this country. I'm looking forward to working with you on the second phase, or the next phase of Plan Colombia. We're going to work with your government to continue to fight drug trafficking. The United States has an obligation to work to reduce the demand for drugs, and at the same time work to interdict the supply of drugs. There's a lot we can do, but part of it is to help you exercise control over all your territory, is to strengthen the rule of law, and to expand economic opportunity for the citizens, and we want to help. The Plan Colombia recognizes the importance of protecting human rights. I appreciate the President's determination to bring human rights violators to justice. He is strong in that determination. It's going to be very important for members of our United States Congress to see that determination. And I believe, if given a fair chance, President Uribe can make the case. If the Colombia government continues to make progress, it's going to earn greater confidence from all its citizens and greater respect in the international community. You've set high expectations for your nation. I appreciate your determination, and I'm proud to call you a personal friend and to call your country a strategic partner of the United States. Thank you for having me. Okay.
Por favor, ¿quién de ustedes asigna la palabra de acuerdo con...
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Mi nombre es Evelyn Anzola.
My name
Soy
is
periodista
Evelyn
de Radio
Anzola.
Santa Fe.
I'm a journalist from Radio
Presidente Bush,
Santa Fe. President
¿Cuál es su
Bush,
opinión sobre el
what
manejo
is
que el
your
gobierno
opinion about
colombiano le ha dado al
the way
escándalo de
in
los
which the
vínculos de
government has
políticos y
handled
funcionarios
the
con
scandal
paramilitares?
of
Cada
the
día se
politicians
conocen más
involved
nombres
in
de
drug
miembros del
trafficking
gobierno vinculados con
and the
estos grupos.
paramilitaries, because we
¿Hasta
know
dónde
that
usted,
there are
señor
many more
Presidente Bush,
members involved
apoya
with the
al presidente Uribe y
paramilitaries?
al
Up
proceso
to
que
what
se sigue
extent do
teniendo
you
en
support
cuenta que la
President
mayoría
Uribe,
de estos jefes
given the fact
paramilitares
that
son
most of these
narcotraficantes?
paramilitary
Y finalmente, Estados Unidos
heads are
insistirá
drug
en la
traffickers,
extradición
and
de estos
finally the
jefes.
U.S. will insist on extraditing these people?
I support a plan that says that there will be an independent judiciary analyzing every charge brought forth, and when someone is found guilty, there's punishment. That's the kind of plan I support. It happens to be the kind of plan the President supports. In other words, there's no political favorites when it comes to justice, that if someone's guilty, they will pay a penalty. And the best way to assure that that penalty is fair and the justice is fair is for there to be a court independent from politics. And so when I asked this very same question to the President about the news I've been reading in Washington, D.C., the same questions he's going to be asked when he and his government come to talk to our Congress, he answered just like I described. He said we have an independent court, we've got a firm law, people will be held to account, whether or not they're, no matter what political party they may or may not be associated with. That's what the people of Colombia expect. That's the kind of justice they're going to receive. Listen, this country's come through some very difficult times. And the best way to heal wounds is for people to see fair, independent justice being delivered. And I believe that's the kind of justice this government will do. Deb.
Some lawmakers on Capitol Hill are finding it disconcerting that the number of U.S. troops deployed keeps climbing. Even the budget revisions that you announced a couple days ago ordered up more. I'm wondering, do you think that the American citizens should now look at the troop buildup that you announced in January, the 21,500, as merely the starting point? And
go ahead.
And President Uribe, with all the talk about Chavez, could you tell us your opinion on whether you think his influence in the region is overstated?
What is my opinion on?
With all the talk about Chavez, could you tell us how much if you think that his influence in the region is overestimated or exaggerated?
The troop announcement I made was over 20,000 combat troops. Secretary Gates and General Pace went up to Congress and testified to the effect that those combat troops are going to need, some support. And that's what the American people are seeing in terms of Iraq. The support troops necessary to help the reinforcements do their job. My hope, of course, is that Congress provides the funding necessary for the combat troops to be able to do their job without any strings attached. Secondly, in terms of Afghanistan, I did announce, as a result of a review of our policy, an additional 3,200 troops. But in addition to that, the troops that you're referring to are going to be part of a training and embedding mission that I did also discuss during that strategy, although I didn't have any details of the troops.
Colombia es un aliado leal de los
is
Estados Unidos,
a loyal ally to the
América
States,
Latina.
and it shows solidarity towards Latin America as well. We have promoted more integration with the USA through Plan Colombia and the Free Trade Agreement, and more integration with Latin America as well. The Andean community, it has been led by Colombia and has an agreement signed with Mercosur. We have contributed to the creation of the South America Union. Colombia has been recently accepted as the main member of a Plan Panama Puebla. So we are looking also for a trade agreement with Canada. We are about to close negotiations with 3 Central American countries, and as you can see, this is our democratic and loyal international policy. With our sister countries, we have the very good relations. We respect and we ask everyone to respect the guiding principles of international public law, as well as the respect for the autonomy in each country and the principle of non-intervention. We have to help one another in promoting freedom and in overcoming poverty and in conquering health. I have to mention something about the question that was asked to President Bush.
Primero,
Number one,
debe saber el mundo entero
the whole world
que este
must
país
know
estuvo
that this country
afectado durante 30 años por
was
guerrillas marxistas.
affected for 30 years
Que esas guerrillas
by the
penetraron la
Marxist
política,
guerrillas, that these guerrillas
periodismo,
infiltrated politics
penetraron
and
el
journalism,
movimiento
that they
sindical,
infiltrated the labor movement
penetraron la universidad,
and labor unions,
y nunca se
universities.
exigió la verdad.
And the truth
Que habrá
was
que
never
exigir en el
demanded,
futuro.
which is something we
Segundo,
have to
debe saber el
demand in
mundo
the future.
que
Number
muchas
two,
regiones de
the
Colombia estuvieron
world
esos
must
30
know
años
that many,
desprotegidas.
during these years, some
Tercero, debe
regions in
saber el
Colombia were
mundo
not protected.
que esas
Number
guerrillas y
three,
la
the world
desprotección
must know
ciudadana
that the
crearon el
guerrillas and the
paramilitarismo.
lack of protection
Cuarto, debe
was
saber
what
el mundo
generated the
que
paramilitarism.
este gobierno
Number four, the world
es
must
el
know
primero
that
que ha
this
emprendido en
administration
Colombia
is the first
la
one
lucha frontal
that
para
has
desmontar el paramilitarismo.
started fighting directly
Hoy
against
hay
the
debate
paramilitarism.
político,
There is a political discussion
pero ha
going on,
disminuido
but
enormemente
the
la agresión paramilitar.
paramilitary aggression has
¿Por qué?
gone down
Porque la ley de
radically.
justicia y
Why?
paz
Because the law on justice
ha
and
llevado a la
peace
gran mayoría de los líderes
has
paramilitares
led
a la cárcel.
most of, or has
Porque
resulted
nuestra
in
política de
most of the
seguridad
paramilitary
democrática
leaders being in jail,
ha dado de
because
baja a
our
más de
security
1.700
policy has
integrantes de las
actually
organizaciones paramilitares.
eliminated more than
Me gusta
1,700 of
mucho
these
esta
paramilitary
concurrencia de periodismo
groups
internacional
members,
a
and I'd
Colombia.
like to have so
Para
many
poder
people from
afirmar
other countries in Colombia present
que
here
la gran
to be
mayoría de
able to
hechos
say that
criminales que
most
hoy
of the
se juzgan
crimes that are being tried
ocurrieron con
and
anterioridad a mi
prosecuted
gobierno.
happened before my
Para
administration.
poder afirmar que la seguridad
To say
democrática
that democratic
ha venido
security
recuperando la
has
transparencia en
been
los procesos electorales de
recovering the
Colombia.
transparency in electoral
Las
processes in
elecciones del año
Colombia,
pasado,
last year's elections,
la oposición a mi gobierno no
The
tiene una sola queja de falta de
opposition to
garantías.
my administration has
Pudieron
not even
visitar
one
todos los
complaint
lugares
about lack of
que en el
guarantees. They
pasado
were able to visit
estaban
all the
vedados,
places which in the past were not possible
porque
to
en
visit.
una parte el control
Because on the
guerrillero no
one
lo
hand there
permitía,
was control
en
by the
otra parte
guerrillas,
el control
and there
paramilitar
was
no lo
also
permitía.
paramilitary control in other regions, and they couldn't visit
Los
these places.
candidatos a la presidencia en las elecciones de
Candidates
2006
running for the presidency in
fueron beneficiarios de garantías
2006
efectivas.
received effective guarantees.
Visitaron todo el
They were
país.
able to visit the whole country.
Se notó el efecto de la
And
política de
the
seguridad
effect of the
democrática
democratic security
porque no hubo
policy was
presiones
quite evident, because there were no
contra ellos
pressures
de terroristas.
against them
La
by
única
the
presión en las
terrorists.
elecciones del
The only
2006
pressure in the
fue
year
contra electores que apoyaban mi
2006 were
candidatura
against the people who
en
supported
departamentos
my
del sur del
campaign
país,
in
donde la
departments
FARC,
in the southern part of the
financiada
country,
con el
where FARC,
narcotráfico, hizo un
together
paro
with the
armado
drug
en
traffickers,
vísperas electorales
introduced
y amenazó a aquellos que
a
votaran por mí.
strike, and they threatened
Eso
those who
lo
were
debe
going
saber
to
el mundo.
vote for me. And this is something that the
Y aquí
world
hubo
should be
candidatos para
aware
el
of.
Congreso y para
And there
la
were
presidencia
candidates
de
to
todas las
Congress and the
vertientes
presidents from
ideológicas.
all ideological
El
movements.
mundo debe saber
The world must
que
also
el que ha
know
exigido la verdad es el
that
gobierno,
it is the government that has asked for the truth,
que es
that
el impulsor de la ley de justicia y paz.
the government is promoting
Que
the
el
law
gobierno
on
es el que
justice
tomó las
and peace,
decisiones
that it is this
de
administration
desmontar
that has made the
militarmente el
decision of
aparato criminal de los
dismantling
paramilitares.
the
Que el
criminal
gobierno es el que
machinery
tomó
of the
las decisiones de
paramilitaries,
llevarlos a la cárcel.
that it was the
Que
government
el
who made
gobierno
the
es el que ha
decision to
tomado la
put them in
decisión
jail, that
de
it
que
is
tienen
this
que entregar
government that
todos
has
los
made the
bienes
decision that they have to
para
give out
poder
their
compensar a las
own
víctimas.
assets for
Y
the
que el gobierno
reparations
es
of
el
the
que ha tomado
victims,
la
and that it
decisión
is the government that
de
has
darle
made
todo el
the
apoyo a la
decision
justicia.
of supporting justice
Por primera
fully.
vez, la Corte
For
Suprema
the
de
first
Justicia de
time,
Colombia,
the Supreme Court
que
of
es
Justice in
independiente,
Colombia, which is an
tiene
independent
un
branch,
cuerpo de investigación
has
propio,
its own investigators.
gracias a la voluntad
Thanks
del gobierno
to
de
the
apropiar los
will of this
recursos presupuestales
administration
para ello.
of funding
Aquí
this
estamos
group.
desmontando lo que se
We are
engendró durante muchos
dismantling
años.
what was built for
Durante
many
más de
years,
3
for
décadas,
more than 3
el
decades.
terrorismo fue avanzando en la
Terrorism
toma de territorio de
advanced
Colombia.
in taking
El
parts of
terrorismo fue
Colombia,
avanzando en la
and
supresión de las
terrorism
libertades,
made
en la
progress
amenaza de
in
los
suppressing
periodistas,
freedoms,
en
in
el
threatening
asesinato de los líderes
journalists,
sindicales.
in assassinating labor union
Y de
leaders.
todo ello
And
nos
of all
estamos
this,
recuperando.
we are actually
Este
making
debate obliga
progress.
también a entrar en anécdotas.
So I think I have to tell
Hace
an
pocos
anecdote
días,
as well.
Fui preguntado si el
Not
gobierno
long
apoyaba
ago, I was asked
la
if the
transmisión
government
directa
supported
en la televisión
direct
de las
transmissions
audiencias
on
en las
TV
cuales
of the hearings
tienen que dar sus versiones los
where
líderes
the
paramilitares que están en la
paramilitaries
cárcel
are
ante
being
los
tried
fiscales.
before the
Yo dije,
prosecutors.
el
And I
gobierno
said
apoya
that the government
esa
supported
transmisión en
this
vivo y en directo
transmission
porque
alive
es un
and
camino de
direct
verdad.
because that is the way to get the truth.
Esto es, aquí, en lugar de existir temor a la verdad,
Instead
lo que ha habido es
of
apoyo a
being
la verdad.
afraid for telling the truth,
En
we
lugar de
have
buscar
been supporting
esguinces a la
truth.
justicia,
Instead
lo que ha
of
habido es
looking for
apoyo a la
ways out
justicia.
of justice, we are trying
Por
to
ejemplo,
support
hablemos del
justice
director
as
del
much
DAS.
as possible. Let's talk about the director of the security agency,
Cuando él
the
salió del DAS,
DAS. When he left
contra
this
él no había
agency,
denuncias
there were no
de vínculos con el paramilitarismo.
complaints of links with
Los hechos por los cuales a él se
paramilitarism
le
against
acusa
him. And he was then
son
accused
hechos
of
que se
facts
conocieron
that were
varios
known
meses después
months
de haberse retirado de la
after he
institución.
left this agency, the security
Y
agency.
tengo que entrar en estos
And
temas
I have to
porque son
discuss
temas
these
que hoy cobran
subjects
mucha
because these are
trascendencia en el
subjects that
debate
are becoming
internacional.
increasingly important
Ha dicho el
in
ministro de
international
Defensa
debates. The Minister of Defense has
que
said that
militares que llegaran a aparecer
if there were any
vinculados
militaries
con organizaciones
related
terroristas,
to terrorist
serán
organizations,
inmediatamente
they
separados
will
del cargo.
be withdrawn from
Pero
their
lo que no
positions.
podemos incurrir
But we cannot
es en el juego que quieren
fall into the trap
los amigos de las guerrillas
of
de que
the
debilitemos las
guerrillas,
fuerzas militares.
that we should weaken
No las
the
vamos a
armed
debilitar,
forces. We are not
porque
going
es
to
el
make
único camino
them
que
weak
tenemos para
because
tener
this is
un
the only
país
way we have
sin guerrillas
to
y
have a
sin
country
paramilitares.
without any guerrillas and without
Miembros de
any
gobierno
paramilitaries. There are
que llegaren a
members,
aparecer con
if
vínculos
they are
con estas
members of this
organizaciones,
government that have any
serán
links to these
inmediatamente
organizations, will
desvinculados.
be immediately removed from
Por
their
eso me
offices.
preocupa que en la
And so
pregunta
I
que
am
hizo la
concerned
distinguida
for the
periodista,
question asked
hizo la
by
afirmación
the journalist,
inexacta
and he said, and
de
this
que
is
hay
not correct,
un crecido
that
número de
there
miembros de
are
gobierno
many members
vinculados
of
a
the
las
government
organizaciones
related
paramilitares.
or with links
Eso
with
se contradice
paramilitary
con lo
groups.
siguiente.
And this is a
Este es el
contradiction
primer
because
gobierno
this is the first government
que empezó a perseguir
that
militarmente a
has
los paramilitares,
prosecuted the
que ha dado de
paramilitaries,
baja
that has
paramilitares y que
actually
los tiene en la
killed some
cárcel.
of the paramilitaries and sent
Vamos a
others
acabar con los
to jail.
paramilitares
We are
y
going to
vamos a acabar
eliminate
con las
the
guerrillas.
paramilitarism and we are
Porque
going
lo que
to
no podemos
eliminate
caer
the
es en el
guerrillas
juego
because we can't
de
fall in the trap
que un escándalo paramilitar
that
frene la realidad de
imposes
unos
a
resultados de
paramilitary
política de
scandal that
seguridad
will
democrática.
actually do away with all the
El señor
results
ministro de
in
Defensa decía en el
democratic
almuerzo
security.
cómo
The Minister of Defense
a los
at
20,000
lunch was
contribuyentes más
saying
ricos de
that
Colombia
we are going
se les
to
está derramando un nuevo
levy a
impuesto
tax
para
on
que
the
contribuyan a la
wealthiest contributors in
consolidación
Colombia
de
so
la
that they
seguridad
can
democrática.
contribute to the consolidation of the
Y vamos
democratic
a
security
ir con la
program.
exigencia de la
And
verdad
we
sin
will
riesgo, sin
demand
temor a
the
riesgos.
truth without any fears.
Y eso es lo que marca
And
la
this
diferencia.
is what makes the difference.
Aquí, cuando yo era candidato a la
When I was
presidencia, se me leyó
running for the
parcialmente el
presidency,
discurso.
I was
Se me
not
escuchó cuando
well
decía que Colombia
interpreted.
tenía que acabar con la
I was
guerrilla,
saying that Colombia
pero
had
de
to
pronto
eliminate the guerrillas,
no se me
but
escuchó
perhaps I was
lo que también
misunderstood
dije,
because I also
que el
said
único camino era el
that the
camino de la
only way
recuperación
was
institucional
to recover
y que por
the
ende
institutions
también
and
había que
hence
acabar con los
that we had to
paramilitares.
eliminate the paramilitaries
El
as
7 de
well.
agosto ajustaré 5
On
años en el
August the
gobierno
7th, I will
y no ha habido
been
una
5
sola
years
hora de este
in
gobierno.
power and
Y lo digo ante un gran aliado,
all the
el
time, and I
presidente de
say
los
this
Estados
before
Unidos,
a great
y ante
ally,
el
the
mundo.
President of the
A
United
través de
States,
esta
and
gran
before
presencia del
the
periodismo
world,
internacional,
thanks to the
no ha habido una
journalists
sola
present
hora de
here,
este gobierno
throughout this
en que no
government,
hayamos dado la
we
batalla
have
contra la guerrilla,
constantly fought
contra el
the guerrillas,
paramilitarismo,
the
contra el narcotráfico.
paramilitaries, and the drug traffickers.
Nuestro único objetivo es una
Continuously,
Colombia
our sole
sin
purpose
esas
is
plagas.
Colombia
Nuestro
free
único
of these
objetivo es una
plagues. Our
Colombia
sole
que
purpose
recupere
is a Colombia
vigorosamente la
that
presencia de
will
las instituciones.
have
Aquí
strong
no hay nada que
institutions
esconder.
again. There is
Aquí hay una
nothing
lucha
to
para
hide
desmontar
here.
el
We
terrorismo
are
y
fighting
que le quede claro
against
a todos los visitantes de la
narco
prensa
and
internacional.
terrorism, and let that be clear to you all.
Buenas tardes. La
Good
pregunta para el señor
afternoon.
presidente
This
Bush.
is a question for President
La guerrilla
Bush.
las FARC en Colombia tiene
FARC,
varios
the FARC,
secuestrados con propósitos
has
políticos desde hace
many
muchos
people
años.
kidnapped for political purposes
Y
and
se está
for
planteando en
very
Colombia la
many
posibilidad de
years,
un acuerdo
and
humanitario
a
para lograr la
humanitarian
liberación, entre otros,
agreement
de
has
3 ciudadanos
been
de su
discussed
país. Esta semana su subsecretario, el señor Shannon, dijo que Estados Unidos sería feliz si se pudiera lograr una solución por la vía del acuerdo humanitario. Mi pregunta concreta, señor presidente Bush, es: ¿usted y su gobierno van a impulsar una alternativa de acuerdo humanitario para lograr la liberación de estos secuestrados, incluso sus 3 ciudadanos americanos, por esta vía como alternativa a una acción militar? Y seguidamente con eso, presidente, ¿o es cierto que ustedes, hoy los 2 presidentes, hablaron de reforzar una acción militar para su recuperación? Y usted no respondió a la anterior pregunta, señor presidente Bush, si usted va a insistir en la solicitud de extradición de los jefes paramilitares en Colombia.
In terms of the extradition, I'm going to work with President Uribe. We've had good relations. We're friends. We've worked very closely on the extraditions. And so it will be a government-to-government decision. In terms of the hostages, I am concerned about their safety. I, really am. I'm worried about their families. These are 3 innocent folks who have been held hostage for too long. And their families are concerned about them. We hear from their families. And, their kidnappers ought to show some heart, what they ought to show. And I've obviously discussed this with the president, and he's developing strategies that will hopefully bring them out safely. That's all I ask. It's amazing, isn't it, to live in a society where you've got part of your country where people just kidnap, and somebody who's here trying to help without any regard to whether or not how their family feels. So that's what I think about, sir. That's what's on my mind about those hostages. Obviously, I'd like to see them come out safely. Matt.
In your assessment, what, if anything, was accomplished at the Baghdad Regional Conference, and what are your expectations for future rounds? Also, do you believe that Iran and Syria were serious in their post-conference statements that they want to help stabilize Iraq? And if that is true, do you see the possibility of opening the way towards more formal direct contacts with those 2 countries?
I'm the kind of person that likes people to say something and then do it. Then we'll react. Words are easy to say in politics and the international diplomacy. If they really want to help stabilize Iraq, there are things for them to do, such as cutting off weapon flows and/or the flow of suicide bombers into Iraq. There's all kinds of ways to measure whether they're serious about the words they uttered. We, of course, welcome those words. Those are nice statements, and now they can act on them. I thought the conference, well, first of all, the conference got people in the neighborhood to say positive things about the young democracy. In other words, people are now committed publicly to helping Iraq, which was, I thought, very positive. I think the other benefit from the conference is that the government gained some confidence. There was this young democracy, had nations from around the neighborhood and around the world come and talk to them in a way that was constructive and positive. Part of the success in Iraq is going to be whether or not this government has got the confidence necessary to make hard decisions. They're learning what democracy is all about. They've come from a tyranny to democracy in a pretty quick period of time. And I believe the conference will give the different factions inside Iraq the confidence necessary to do the hard things, to reconcile, and the government the confidence necessary to make the decisions so that reconciliation can happen. So it was a positive outcome. And in terms of the expectations of the next meetings, we'll see. But the point is that the momentum made in the first one can be carried over to the second one. Secretary Rice will be going to that meeting. In other words, it's a step up in, I'm not dissing anybody, but it's a step up in the pay grade, let's put it that way. And I think Condi will take an agenda that will help advance this young democracy, and she's going to work with the other nations to do so. Gracias, señor presidente.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much.